Hi, Mike. Good morning, and welcome to my show, The Disruptive Leaders.
No, thank you, Neil
Uh,
Langford. I'm glad to be here.
Great, and it's really an honor for you, for me, Mike, because you decided to participate on this show. So, just as I was talking to you earlier on, the Disruptive Leaders is a channel wherein I request some of the leaders from different paths and different walks of life who have worked with people, culture, innovation, basically any leader who have come up with a different thought process and has broken the norms, set a complete different paradigm in their area of work or in their area of community, society, and made a change around that. So that's what this entire channel is about. Our audience are students, people who are experienced. Even there are some people who are like our peers, but our objective is to share an unique thought process and perspective. Definitely, your answer may have multiple other people might have opinion, but that's fine. We are open to any sorts of opinion. It's just your own perspective that we would go out to the world and share with them. So that's the entire objective. So once again, welcome, Mike, and I would request you to give a short introduction of yours, and then I will talk about the theme of today's meeting.
All right, great. Well, thank you. Yeah, as you mentioned, my name is Mike Kearney, and I work for Siemens, and I've been at the company for about 27 years, in the industry for 34 years. And what I focus on is enterprise business for Siemens, where we provide consistency and standardization for those customers across their portfolio. We have a large team of employees that report up through me, several hundred people. And over my career, my big focus, and I'll talk a little bit about it during this podcast, is on the well-being and inspiration of our employees.
Wow, great. And that's the entire theme for it. You know, today we are talking about a lot of automation. We are a lot talking about AI, robotics, and in future we may be working with robots sitting besides us. But I feel that human brain, or the part which really distinguishes from a mechanical world is our empathy, our ability to understand the human emotions and interact or react accordingly. So today's theme is caring for your employee. And in my experience, though not as extensive as yours, but in my experience, I've seen and I've read also amongst very many leaders, caring for your employee results in employee caring back for customers. That's what all business wants. And additionally, we get something called a discretionary effort by the employees, because once you start showing that empathy, the same thing gets circled back here, and that's the discretionary effort. So that's the theme of today's conversation, and my questions would be centered around this. And straight away jumping to my first question, when we talk about employees, Mike, I'm talking about an employee life cycle. And being a people leader, you have hired people, you have managed people for their career growth. Even you would have kept connection with people after they have left. Maybe at some point of time, they have come back to your team after getting some experience outside. So we would be talking around this entire life cycle. So my first question to you would be, let's focus on the recruitment process. So according to you, what is the most important factor which a candidate is interested when he or she is applying for a job? Is it always about compensation and brand value? And a related question to this is, a leader, what is her or his role to give that candidate a wow experience, or make sure that the candidate decides to join your organization no matter what?
Yeah, it's a great question. Something I'm very passionate about. It all starts with getting the right people. For me, the best candidates, it always
Mhm,
comes down to culture and fit.
mhm,
We talk
mhm,
about that extensively.
mhm,
They really want to be at a company that shares their traits, their personal values, things that they're aligned with. And you mentioned compensation, and certainly that is a factor. But in all
yes.
my time, it's never been the deciding factor. Uh, you need to be directionally in the ballpark, but I've never had an instance where that was the final decision maker. Yes, brand. You asked about brand. Brand is important, but it's more about what's behind the brand. And it's not just the brand of the company, but it's the brand of the manager. And talk about that life cycle and how to do things a little bit different. I'll just give you one example. I was running a business a number of years ago, our energy business for Siemens, and I was at an event and I heard a couple of our managers out in the field talking about they had this incredible candidate who they really were excited about. That candidate turned us down, turned them down, and was deciding to go to a different company. And I asked them, I
Mhm,
said, hey, do you think it'd be okay if I reached out to this candidate? The candidate wasn't going to report to me, but was going to be a part of my overall business. And they said, sure, go ahead, go ahead. And I called the candidate, introduced myself, and told him I was responsible for the business and asked him if he would, come visit with me where I could talk to him and share a little bit more insight about our company. We paid for him to jump on a plane, come to our headquarters. I
mhm.
prepared for that meeting like I used to prepare when I was selling. I put a whole presentation together, a PowerPoint, spent an entire day with him. But I asked a lot more questions than did presenting. And I learned a lot more about what his drivers were and what he wanted to do. And it turned out we were a perfect fit. And didn't do a hard sell. Asked him to reconsider. He did, and that was several years ago. And he's still with the company 10 years later and is one of our top performers. And we still talk about that today. I'm not in that business anymore, but I love watching him rise up in the organization and do great things. And it was just by doing something a little bit different, taking a little bit different tact to go recruit and get personally engaged in the recruiting process.
I completely agree. A leader's commitment towards hiring people, especially the business leader, I think has a lot deep and profound impact on candidates when you're doing bulk hiring, even when you're doing small or niche hiring. More, I would say the impact is much higher than an HR speaking, because HR
Sure.
is anyway the front face. But when the business leader comes in, I believe that personal connect is really profound.
Well, it's really important too that you get involved, even if you're not the direct hiring manager, like you mentioned, even if you're a couple layers up. I did that recently, just a couple weeks ago. I was the one actually that jumped on a plane to go visit a candidate and met with him and his wife for dinner, got to know him personally, and he was a top candidate at another company, but really wanted to get to know him. And I'm going to end. He's going to come to Siemens. I'm going to be his mentor and get personally engaged in his career development. But again, that was something that I felt that was necessary, that he hear from others within the organization, like you said, besides HR or his direct manager,
Right.
to know where he's going to fit, and that it's more about his immediate job, but we're interested in him as an employee for the life cycle, like you mentioned.
Wow. Oh, that's really great. I will just move on now to the next part. Once we get the candidate on board. Now, there is often this high pressure role, especially in a sales role or in an operational role. I get a person, and especially this happens at a lower end, or I would say maximum at a project manager end. We need the person on board. When the person is here, like the team or the lead is eager to have this person get on with the job, start working day one, because I do understand that the managers themselves are under pressure. So, in this kind of a scenario, we often lose out on the candidate or an employee experience. You, as a leader, and especially when the focus is on high hiring, high high pressure role. As a leader, how do you make that differentiating experience which brings in a lot of a wow experience for a new hire when she joins an organization?
Yeah, this is also another very important part of the process. One thing we have to realize, we have to step back and realize this is a very emotional time for new hires. Changing companies is a pretty big deal, and these employees are very impressionable in the beginning. They're not always sure that they made the right choice. So we spend I spend a lot of time with my support staff in HR to make sure that that process, that onboarding process is on the rails, meaning it is tight and it is efficient. The little things actually become the big things, things like you take for granted about having your PC and your phone, a working phone on day one. That
Right.
seems to be something small, but it really makes a difference. It's frustrating when you get to a new, we've all heard about stories where employees get to a new company and they're not able to get on the network for a week or two, and the PC doesn't work, and they feel like they're on an island, and they're alone, especially in a virtual world where, at least our business, we're not all in one local office, so we have to work a little bit harder at this. The other thing that's really important, though, is getting them connected day one, day two, week one, week two, with as many different of their peers and colleagues in the business as possible. And we talked about culture, in the last question. And if you have a really high performing culture and your people truly care and are empathetic about their colleagues, they will welcome these new employees and they will feel like they're part of a family right out of the gate. Every new employee, our communications group, they send out an announcement to all of our employees, that the new candidate, writes their own bio and explains a little bit about their personal life, whatever they're comfortable sharing, so that people get to know them. We include a picture of them. That goes out to everybody. When I see those, I always send out a personal note as a leader of the business, thanking them for joining Siemens, welcoming them to our family, telling them I'm really interested in watching them grow in their career, and wishing them the best in their role. It's just a small personal touch. One actually side benefit out of this that we noticed, and it wasn't on purpose, but this is a great recruiting opportunity for us. And what I mean by that is, whatever happens when you have someone that changed a job, everyone in their personal life, their former company, people they know in the industry, ask them, hey, how is it at Siemens? How's it going? And it's usually in those first couple of weeks. And if they have an over the top great experience with us, they're going to be a walking billboard for Siemens, and telling everyone how great it is here. And certainly I know that's a honeymoon phase and it should be pretty good. But if the opposite happens and they're not sure and they're questioning and they're saying, well, I don't have my computer, that's not good recruiting. And so it's just a side benefit that they don't even know it, but they are kind of indirectly recruiting for us in those early stages. We've actually landed in other employees because of that, because like, wow, it's really that great. Maybe I should, look into them. So that's just a side benefit, but that's not the driver. The driver needs to be the well-being of the employee and making sure that they have a really good onboarding experience.
Wow, I completely resonate this fact, and in one of my experience in my previous organization, I noticed when the leaders personally got engaged in ensuring that personalized space for a new employees, as we call in our HR term, the infancy accretion started plummeting down. And people started really relating with the organizations and recommending their friends and families, whoever could.
Yeah,
Join. Yeah,
sure.
that is a good opportunity. I completely agree. Uh, I will now shift my focus to a slightly different part. In my experience, most of the survey I noticed, and while there are a lot of good things they talk about their workspace, some are not so good thing. One feedback is consistent regarding recognition, regarding appreciation. And no matter whatever you do, you may have the best program and process for it, people still feel there is a lack. Sometimes it is not at the, not forthcoming. Appreciation is not forthcoming at that very opportunity. It is at a later date when it kind of subsides. Sometimes they lose out despite not being at the front end. They are at the backstage and they are not getting mentioned. But I always felt that this is a gap which many employees crave for, a little bit of appreciation. What has been your experience, or what have you done very differently so that you can always acknowledge and appreciate your people, no matter how small their contribution has been?
Yeah, it's a good question. The thing you have to realize, at least for me, that I noticed, this is a custom job. This is not a one size fits all. And the reason I say that is people like to be recognized in different ways. Some people, and I'm always super hyper excited about, recognizing people and doing all those grand things. Some people shy away from public recognition. So the first thing you really need to understand is, to the custom part, understand how that employee wants to be recognized. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. The other thing that's really important is it has to be for something special, above and beyond. We're not going to, perfect attendance, participation trophies. We're not doing that, because employees pick up on that. And if everybody's getting recognized, it takes away from the effect, right? So, and people understand that. For us, there's a variety of ways to go about recognizing employees. Something we do a really good job of is we call them shout outs. And those are typically done by peers, peer to peer, where they shout out and one of their colleagues for doing above and beyond great things. We get very specific of what they did. We always tie it to the company priorities and the goals and our strategies. So that's something we do in our regular quarterly calls. I have a quarterly town hall, and we do a lot of shout outs and recognition. Sometimes it's a personal phone call by the top manager in that business, the senior executive. I do a lot of those, just one-on-one, especially for people that don't want the big fanfare. But it can just be a 10-minute phone call to say, hey, what you did, and your point earlier was really good, that it needs to be timely. It's not going to be months later, because then it wanes and it's not going to have the effect. The other thing, too, is I encourage you is look at your company. A lot of companies are really good at this. They have means to do this. Take advantage of the different things that your company has. We have something that we reward points, where people can you can assign an award a fellow colleague points that they can go through a catalog and buy gifts, or you can do cash points where they actually get a cash award. And even if it's a couple $100, the saying gets said a little bit too often, but the thought that counts, it's true. Somebody's like, wow, so-and-so, I didn't know they knew what I did. And the top boss recognized me and sent me a couple $100 and a nice, message. That means a lot. The last thing I'll say here is that look at the mass of how you recognize on a larger scale. And what I mean by that is pay attention to the public recognition you do as a business. One of the recent quarterly calls I had, I got a personal email from an employee that called me out on this. And he said, hey, Mike, I noticed that you guys do a lot of recognition and shout outs on your quarterly calls for the salespeople that land the big job, the big project. He said, although that's great, you guys are missing out on a lot of the frontline operational people that are doing great things for our customers day in and day out that are more operations based. And I listened, and I told our management team that, and we retooled and we pivoted and we changed the way we do it. And we're much more diverse in the types of people that we recognize. And it's been great. It's all walks of life. It can be finance, it could be operations, it could be marketing, it could be sales, anything, a frontline specialist or technician. So pay attention also to the individual, but also just kind of in the mass of how you recognize your employees.
I agree, and I remember two instances. The first one was very similar to the one you just mentioned. Some people like a personal email or a personal call, and they're happy about it. And if you try to make it public, they feel very embarrassed. Similarly, there are people who come and say that, hey, I wouldn't have got the best account, or wouldn't have completed the big project, but then there has been a significant effort. I do agree that effort needs to be acknowledged, even if you don't appreciate much, but the effort needs to be
Yep.
acknowledged as a leader. That
Yep.
makes it very, very, uh, I think so. That's a differentiator factor. I completely agree to that. I'll now focus or move on to another part. And this is, I think everyone tries to crack this code. And I felt whether it is a family or a workplace where you're working, the most important is the culture of the organization. And the culture is what which retains an employees and allows the employee to flourish. What has been your experience, or what do you think is one of the most pivotal force in setting up an organization culture, which is very unique?
Yeah, well, it's first off, culture, it's everything. You know, most of us are familiar with Peter Drucker saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. You know, that's something we live by. It's very true. For me, the most important factor in it is authenticity. And that starts at the top. I mentioned earlier that our employees are very impressionable. They can tell if you're faking it and if it's
Oh,
not real.
yes.
So authenticity, being genuine, that is so critically important. And for us and for me, this is a full contact sport every day. It needs to be consistent. You really need to advocate for your employees. It's important that they know where they fit in the organization and what they do ties to your strategic goals and where the company is going. It's also important that they know that senior management has their back. Um, you know, in turn, they will feel empowered, they will be happy, they will be inspired. And when those things happen, you're going to get way more out of them because they're going to be able to be creative, bold, make decisions. Whereas if the opposite is the case, they're going to be hesitant. They're going to feel like they're walking on eggshells. You're not going to get the best of them. So again, get the very best people, take incredibly good care of them, empower them, and your business will flourish.
Yeah, indeed. And with culture, thought, and that has been the theme of our conversation, a thought comes to my mind. How important is being empathetic to your colleagues? I'm just not talking about your employees. Colleagues is the larger ecosystem, or rather caring for them. Do you think this is what fuels the culture, and being transparent, does that help bring transparent and building trust?
It actually does. And I mentioned earlier, your employees know whether you truly care or not. Um, you know, we have to remind ourselves sometimes, I mean, we're all running really fast and working hard and a lot of hours and everything in the job, but we have to step back and remind ourselves these are human beings with feelings, emotions. They have personal lives. Yes, the job is just a job, but they spend a disproportionate amount of their time in the job. So it's
Indeed.
important that they feel valued and appreciated. And you have to drive that from the top. And when you truly care, you don't have to work at it. It just comes natural. And like I said earlier, your employees really pick up on that.
Yes, yes, I do agree. Uh, During my course in, one of my professor told me, and she was telling that, giving an instance with her conversation with Satya Nadella, and she mentioned the first thing when he became the CEO, he was asked that what is that you want to drive in, and he said empathy. That is his first value system. Uh, you know, uh, Currently there are a lot of studies which are going around about leadership behavior, leadership qualities. One of the factor which is a paradigm shift in our growing up days, we felt a leader has to be visionary, leader has to be the role model. While all this still holds in today's world, a leader is a person who is easily accessible, who is people or his team understands his or her thought process, what the leader wants to communicate, and they align their vision accordingly. So, as a leader who, and I'm now talking about you personally, you have led large businesses, you have led transformations, you have led big and large multicultural teams. What are the behaviors you have developed or evolved, which you feel are very critical today, irrespective of whichever generation of employees you're dealing with, that is in terms of age, in terms of culture, in terms of you have a complete diverse workforce. So as a leader, what are those behaviors you inculcate or you encourage, uh, and you are the role model for that?
Yeah, I think one of the couple of the words that come to my mind are, and it's really simple stuff. It's be vulnerable and real. And you said accessible, and we're very non-hierarchical. We don't talk about titles or positions, and our employees love that. Everybody's accessible from the top all the way down, and we're a team, and we drive that through our business. And that you really got to get to know your people, and there's many ways to go about that. And just by being real, I'll give you a couple examples. Sometimes it's when you have these company get-togethers, it's important to maybe be the last one in the bar, talking with your fellow colleagues and connecting with people. And one example is just last year we had our annual sales event, and I was one of the last people out and talking with an employee, and it was at the bar, and we were talking about books, and just talking about personal things. And I love to read, and he does too. And he told me that he was an author, an actual published author. I was fascinated by that. And I asked him a little bit about his book, and I got on my phone and I bought it on the spot on Amazon. And now that's a personal connection that he and I have, that we would have never had if I wasn't spending time, really getting to know him. Um,
Indeed.
Something else that I do regularly, and it's one of the most fun parts of my job, is setting up calls with employees that don't report directly to me. It could be one layer down, it could be 5 layers down. I constantly ask, and my managers know this, and they'll be listening to this and probably smile, because I always ask them, who on your team, should I make a personal phone call to? Who do you think maybe needs a little pick me up? Who needs maybe just a little bit of recognition? Who would be good to talk to? Who are you a little concerned about? They're a big talent, but we want to make sure they're not a flight risk. We're constantly doing that. And then they in turn do that with their employees, with their managers. So I set up these calls. I do these every week. I do several of them a week. And first off, they're just fun. I get to meet people and talk to people. We do a video chat like this. And I get to know them. Sometimes I recognize them for doing something good. They're like, wow, I can't believe you knew I did that. And it was kind of under the radar. And I said, no, we pay attention, and what you did matters. And this is how it ties to our, where we're going as a business. Sometimes I get to hear about some concerns, and many times it's low-hanging fruit. I can take care of something in 10 minutes after the call that addressed what they needed or wanted. But it's also a great way to learn about the business. When you learn about it from your frontline people, you can get blinded by the financials and the forecasts and all that stuff, and you really don't get to know the business from the bottom up. And so it's a great learning opportunity, but I enjoy it most just for the personal connection. And it's a great way to meet your people, understand where they're coming from, do that on a regular basis, and do it with all walks of life. You said, we are a very diverse business. So, how you treat a millennial is a little bit different than how you treat, a
Yes.
30-year veteran. Um,
Right.
and so you really need to customize your approach when you do that.
I love the fact that you acknowledge and accept a leader needs to be vulnerable and be transparent about it, because that's where you create that human bonding. Great. Uh, Before we sign off, and I tried to, delve into all the aspects, but we have a limited time. Thanks for sharing so many stories and instances. Uh, Going back to the theme, caring for employees leads to that discretionary effort and caring back for customers. What is that parting thought, irrespective of whatever hierarchy today people are working, whether self-employed or employed? What is that parting thought you would want our viewers and audience to leave with? Uh,
Yeah, I think you got to really spend the time getting the absolute best people on board that have the intangibles and the personal traits that fit and match your company culture. Once you do that, take incredibly good care of them. You know, a lot of TLC, customize your approach with your employees. And I call it the math behind this. The math is actually pretty simple. You go get the absolute best employees, they in turn are going to take incredibly good care of the customers because you know you've got the best people. When those two things happen, you know, the third leg of we call it the triangle, the shareholder certainly gets taken care of. But the shareholder, that's not the driver. It's got to start with the employee, the well-being of the employee. When you do that, I think you're going to have a successful business.
Thank you. That is really the punchline. And thanks a lot for your time, Mike. I really appreciate. And I'm sure our viewers would be very appreciative of that too. I'll be very eager to see what their comments are. And definitely we can revert or answer back to them for any queries or further interactions if they would want to. All right. Thank you, Mike. With this, we can end this conversation.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I wish you all the best in leading your organizations and your people. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.